Republican Zone is brought to you by Drew Murray, a modern view from the Republican lens, covering local and national news, understanding that one size doesn't fit all when it comes to politics. The Republican Zone airs Wednesday from 1 to 2 p.m. and Saturday from 3 to 4 p.m.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Usula Radio. My name is Drew Murray, and I am the host of the Republican Zone. I have a very special guest here today, a very busy guest for the past few weeks. My friend Councilman David O. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for the invitation, Drew.
Always like having a Dickinson Red Devil on my show.
Yes.
Football, I think David and I were the two best football players to go through Dickinson College.
I was the best bench warmer that college ever saw.
That's about what I was as well. So yeah, we're in the same boat. Well, thank you for coming. As I stated, you have had a very, very, very busy few weeks. A few weeks ago, as we all know, Safe House announced the opening of a safe injection site in South Philadelphia. So kind of everything went crazy on a local standpoint down in South Philadelphia. Things went crazy in City Council. And, I want to first thank you for your leadership on this because I will say one thing. This is called the Republican Zone, but when I ran for City Council last year, every single Republican said we are against safe injection sites. That we need to find answers to help those under the thrall of addiction. But safe injection sites are not the way to go. And I'll be honest, a lot of people who are running, both incumbents and challengers, on the Democratic side, they oftentimes did not answer that they were opposed. In fact, they oftentimes didn't give an answer. I will say Councilwoman Gim did give an answer. She said she was supportive of them, and so I give her credit for that because she told the truth.
It's important to tell the truth and be transparent so that the voters can decide if they like what you're doing or not.
Exactly, but a lot of answers were, you know what, we got to look at all options, and then we got to go forward and decide. And I never liked that answer because you know what, it didn't upset anyone in the room. Right. When I sat there and said I'm against safe injection sites, there were people in the room. It's a difficult subject.
It is. I mean, I actually introduced the first resolution that addressed heroin opioid addiction in its new form here in Philadelphia as a citywide problem. Now, Maria Quinones-Sanchez has been dealing with this problem in Kensington and the surrounding area, but as kind of like a citywide issue covering all of Philadelphia. I did that in 2015. And then in 2016, I did a resolution to do hearings. I actually went out into communities, 7 community hearings in Roxborough, in South Philadelphia, Manayunk, the Northeast, 7 different communities, North Philadelphia, West Philly. And we heard from a lot of people. And, I consider myself like a pretty astute person with a lot of streetwise experiences and a former, assistant DA. I've done criminal defense. So I know the issue from a lot of different angles. But at these community meetings, these were family members. People have lost sons and daughters, parents, and the scope and impact of the opioid crisis, the heroin crisis, was something that I was really surprised of, because up until then, it was always something understood as people who had instability, mental health issues, trauma in their life, poverty. But what we were seeing was young people with bright futures, very capable, well-adjusted folks, ODing on heroin in Philadelphia and living the life of a person on the streets, at least partially, before they went home, and so they were coming and going. But that whole process then led to a panel of experts, including our health commissioner, Dr. Farley, and at the time the secretary of drug and alcohol, which was Gary Tennis, and a lot of other, Dr. Arthur Evans from behavioral health. And we ended up making 10 recommendations on how to cut red tape, improve services long-term, do all that stuff there was not one mention of safe injection sites. But one recommendation was to create a task force, which the mayor did. And actually, because of my work, I was invited to serve on the task force. And we held several meetings. The DEA, the police force, the high-intensity drug unit, they were all there, as well as advocates of harm reduction, medical, behavioral health, all that. And at the very end, when we were making recommendations through agreement, a few people brought up this thing I never heard of, safe injection sites. And it sounded pretty like not legal here in the United States. I didn't know how it was legal anywhere,
Yes.
but they were very passionate. They said, this works. The evidence shows it works. The DEA and, of course, the law enforcement people were like, no, it doesn't work, and here's a counterproof. But it was like at the last minute, and we had to make a decision. And most of us, myself included, well, we didn't have the data. We didn't have the evidence. We didn't read the reports. We really couldn't say. So the final agreement was kind of like just to say, okay, there's a thing called safe injection sites, and, you should look at it further.
Sure.
And the task force was done. It was over. We never met again. Next thing I know, the city is saying our opioid task force, heroin task force, is doing this, saying that. And I said, that's not the same task force. It's very misleading to
Sure.
call it the task force, because that's the only thing they were talking about was safe injection sites. And I said, it was not a recommendation. So fast forward, we're kind of looking at the intensity of the community meetings in Kensington and the back and forth and all that, as you would expect. And underlying it, well, basically, it's whatever they're going to do, it's a violation of state and federal law. And then comes the federal court decision, and then it's finalized on a Tuesday and Wednesday. Safe House just announces we're going to start operating a safe injection site next week in South Philadelphia, where nobody expected it. There was no community meetings. There was no obvious sign that somehow there was a need for it there. And I think that really just completely shook not just South Philadelphia, but within no time, they were announcing they were going to look at 22 sites across Philadelphia.
Sure.
And so that was more than alarming. That was shocking.
And Safe House knew it. I mean, I need to say this: the Safe House people, they're trying to do something that is good. They're trying to.
They believe it's good.
They absolutely do.
Yeah, and they also believe that people don't understand. They also believe that people are, they don't want it in their backyard, which is saying that no matter how good it is, they don't want it. And I think they also feel that they can't overcome that anywhere in the city. And so what they've pretty much said, and their advocates, is that this is a medical issue, and it should not be one that is left up to the community. And here we have like just an insurmountable problem, because what they're saying is we know better than you.
Sure.
And we're going to do the good that you are not going to do. And what we have tried to say in reverse is this. There are a lot of people who are very knowledgeable about this topic. And for those who aren't, and for those who may be knowledgeable to a certain degree, you have an obligation to educate them, to answer their questions, to all that. The fact that you're unable to convince them does not mean you change this formula and exclude the very people who live in the community. And perhaps maybe if there was a way for you to do it, it would not be smack in the middle of a neighborhood that does not want it. And then to kind of like cast people in a bad light, say like, oh, it's NIMBY. Like, in other words, the only reason you're doing this is because you're selfish. No, it's their community.
Sure.
They have every right to care about what affects their children, their families. And by the way, that community right there has 2 methadone clinics. So it's not like there aren't things in the community, but this is something that has never been in any community of Philadelphia legally.
Sure.
And so the consequences of putting a safe injection site in Philadelphia is it comes with the support of the city, including the police. And now the problem is a lack of services when you call the police, a acquiescence into both the crime and the addiction that comes with it. And I'm saying that is the concern. That doesn't mean that can't be addressed by the people who like or favor safe injection sites. What it means is it's not enough to say you're a selfish person who doesn't understand what I'm talking about, and I shall make this decision for you. That's not working.
Sure. And the bottom line is Safe House, they knew what the process was because
Oh,
they
yeah.
did it in Kensington. They
Listen,
had started the conversation.
Oh,
in Kensington.
absolutely. This is something they did intentionally because after years of trying to persuade the community in Kensington that this was a good thing, the community was like, no, it's a bad thing. And so this is not the first time Safe House tried it. It's the second time. And so this is a pattern, and it is a great concern that, when people believe that they know what's best and they're smarter than you and they're doing, they have the courage to do what you don't, they are saying we are going to do this without you.
With or without you, absolutely. Yeah. So it goes to the question that I've always asked. I say always in the last few weeks, and it's a zoning matter. You can't dig a hole in the city of Philadelphia without having community meetings. And I understand that the court ruled that this site would not be illegal to open, but that doesn't mean there's not illegal activity happening in the site.
Absolutely, correct.
So how could anything like this not require a variance from the city of Philadelphia from a zoning standpoint? There's nothing in the zoning code rewritten 10 years ago that states safe injection sites are part of CMX3, for example.
Right.
So I always said at a minimum, this needs to go through the variance process. This needs to go through an RCO, a coordinated RCO, to allow for public comment, to allow for public outreach. I never really understood that, and I still don't necessarily understand it. And I bet people on city council, the 17 of you, are probably looking at that saying, this probably does require a variance because it's an illegal activity that could never have been written into the zoning code, that it is an as-of-right project.
So, this is a novel, as in absolutely new thing that is occurring, not just in Philadelphia, but the entire United States. And so what happens is the issues involved with it are very problematic in the sense that you may be kind of making something legal in a way that you don't want to do when you try to address it. And so kind of starting from there, let me say that, as you said, even though the federal court said that the goal and the activities of a safe injection site are not in violation of the Controlled Substances Act, every other thing is, from purchasing the heroin to walking across the street to walking into the place to getting a needle to injecting yourself to getting high and walking out high. All of that is illegal, plus every other thing that it brings with it. So, as you said, the federal court is not saying all of this is legal. They're just saying that the actual activity and goal of supervised injection sites do not violate the Controlled Substances Act.
Sure.
However, that is on appeal. In the meantime, there isn't a stay, far as I know. And so from where we sit right now, they can open a safe injection site anywhere in the city. How are they opening it without zoning, a variance, and all that? Because it is the city. It's not you or me or, it is Safe House, but with the support of the health department, the mayor, the district attorney, and everyone else. And so what they did is this, the law department, what they did is this. They said, this is a medical health establishment, and so we are just walking into a location that is already zoned. And so we don't need zoning. The issue that you raise and that I have raised in the way that I did through the healthcare nuisance establishment ordinance is this. You are unlike any healthcare establishment in America in that you rely on people who are violating federal and state laws. You knowingly have a process where they have purchased some type of heroin, the content of which you and I don't know. They walk in, you give them a needle, they inject themselves, and then you watch what happens, and hopefully they won't die from an overdose. And so that makes them different from any
Sure.
other type of healthcare establishment. However, since they are working with the city to open as a healthcare establishment, if we are to, for example, say, oh, no, you got to go through a zoning process. We're going to identify you in the zoning code. We're going to go through all that. We're going to have to differentiate you from a methadone clinic. That may or may not work because you are also creating a situation where although they are excluded from the Americans with Disabilities Act, and for those who don't know, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, protects persons with disabilities, physical and intellectual, including addictions, from being discriminated against. And so what happens is, just as you cannot discriminate against someone who is, for example, in a wheelchair, you cannot discriminate against someone who has an addiction, provided that they are not doing drugs, illegal drugs, that they are former drug abusers, even if they are in recovery. But the minute they are using drugs, they are no longer protected.
Gotcha. I'm going to take a 1 minute pause right now so we can go to commercial, and then we'll come back and talk. You're listening to Usula Radio and the Republican Zone.
Hello, my name is Sheila E. Armstrong, and I'm a candidate for the 2nd Congressional District. The reason why I'm the best candidate for the 2nd Congressional District is because I am on the ground doing the work. As your community congresswoman, I'm committed to go door by door and neighborhood to neighborhood to address the issues in our community. For instance, one issue that is concerning to me is gun violence. The day is January the 16th. And the city of Philadelphia has 22 murders, which is more than a days in a year. This is not right. And you deserve to live in a city and a community that is safe. As your community congresswoman, I will work diligently to fight for you, the people. My name is Sheila E. Armstrong, and I am the best candidate for the 2nd Congressional District. Thank you.
Welcome back. You're listening to Usula Radio and the Republican Zone. I am here with my friend Councilman David O. And right before we had to go on break, Councilman O was discussing safe injection sites and their possible, I'll say, relationship or tie to the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Yeah. So what happens is, for example, people wonder, like, how do methadone clinics end up in my neighborhood? Well, how they end up is that someone posts a notice. For example, if it's a building that never had a medical facility in it, it says, medical coming, all that. People are thinking, oh, pediatrician, doctor. And next thing you know, it's a methadone clinic. Well, the reason you can't say this is a methadone clinic is because under the ADA, you are not allowed to somehow discriminate against that methadone clinic because the people are not breaking the law. They have been detoxed. They have been brought down by a physician. They have chosen to go through medically assisted treatment. They are arriving without any controlled substances. They're not purchasing drugs. They're simply there to be treated, right? So under those circumstances, you cannot identify this as a methadone clinic. You can't write a zoning thing. Every medical thing is allowed here except drug rehabilitation. And so kind of what Safe House and the city is basically doing in the case of South Philadelphia is saying this is a medical establishment. We are doing health and rehabilitation, and so we just can open a place because it's already zoned for this, and it's already a medical services building. So that's really kind of what they're doing. And being that this is new, what happens is that we have a existing ordinance in the code which says that, for example, if there are two health establishments, healthcare establishments, let's say methadone clinics, one, you wouldn't even know it's there. It's clean, it's nice, it's quiet, people come in and out. It's not a disruption. The other one, there's cigarette butts, there's drug sales, there's prostitution, there's all that stuff going on. There, under this section of the code, you would notify the health department. They could send inspectors if they want to. They don't have to. They can. If they do, they may find that is a nuisance health establishment and basically take action to prevent it from operating. So what I did was I put it under that section as a presumption that can be overcome. So you can overcome the presumption. It's not a ban. The proponents of safe injection sites like to call it a ban. They said it's practically a ban. It's not a ban. But what they are basically saying is they cannot meet the threshold. But what they're really saying is we should not have to even have a threshold. We're knowledgeable people. We have medicine on our side, data, facts, that we should just be able to put it here because we think it's best for Philadelphia. And that's where we are saying, no. This is not something that you get to decide is absolutely good with no downside and that you don't have an obligation to explain it to people. So the threshold was 90% of the community within a 1 mile area. Now, after amendment, it's 80% in a half mile area. So, if anything, the reason for that is the burden is on them to convince the community. Something that I think is very important for them to do. But when they do that, they will have to answer questions and they will be challenged on some of the things that they're presenting as fact.
Sure. And that bill, and that threshold you're talking about, was part of your bill, which I guess we should say the number 200189, which was the bill that made it through committee.
Yes.
Last week. It will be read, I think, is it Tuesday next week?
Well,
it's just tell me the next steps.
It's going to be. It made it out of committee with a favorable recommendation. We will skip tomorrow, Thursday, council session, but next Thursday is when it will probably be voted on.
Okay.
Yeah. So 200189. That's the bill number. And if anybody wants to come in to have a say, you sign up for public comment on the bill. You identify yourself. I am so-and-so, and I urge you to vote for the bill. I urge you to vote against the bill, whatever you want to say in 3 minutes.
And when, and that's Thursday?
The 19th.
The 19th. And what time?
So, it's safe if you get there around 10 o'clock in the morning, and you won't go right away. You got to sit through the different things of council somewhere around 12 o'clock, 11:30, 11:15, 12:15, who knows when. They will have public comment.
Be ready to hunker down for the day.
Hunker down.
And listen and hear a lot of things because there's going to be another vote.
But this will probably be the top thing on the agenda.
Okay. So on Facebook, when I told people you were coming on, and thank you again for coming on last minute.
Yep.
So Justin Brooks, who is a friend of mine on Facebook, asked, you kind of already answered his one question on, you alluded to it, is 80% really a ban? And his follow-up question is, if this is really a democratic process, why not just have a simple majority? Why the 80%?
So it's not a ban. It is a high threshold. And it is a high threshold because we already know people don't want it.
Sure.
So we don't want to make it a low threshold that somehow people can skirt around the fact that you need to engage the community. You need to invite them to hear about it. You need to present why you think it's good, your proofs and all that, because you are, in addition to, it's not just like a 7-Eleven you're bringing into the community. You are bringing in criminal activity. Nobody's going to argue with that. The safe house people, bring your heroin, however you got it, wherever you purchase in, shoot up in here, leave here. And once you left the threshold of their door, They have no right to tell you where to go. So if you want to hang out there, and one of the things we have to get then into the facts of this, but let me try to answer again. It's not a ban. It's a high threshold.
Okay.
If you want to have a block party, you need 75% of your neighbors
That is a
to
good
sign
point.
on, right? And this is not a block party. This is like heroin folks, come on in here, shoot up. And yeah, we understand it brings what? It brings drug dealers, it brings prostitution, it brings lots of things.
Sure. It's not a quality of life issue. It's a life
Yeah.
it's a life safety issue. It's
Right.
not just quality of life.
Yeah. And what I've said is this to the city and the Safe House and to any of the advocates: if you don't think it should be 90%, what should it be?
Sure.
Tell me. 10%, 5%, 0%. And none of them presented a percentage because fundamentally what they're saying is we don't want to have any type of threshold because they don't think they can get this in any neighborhood of Philadelphia based on a threshold. What they want to say is we have the right to put it where we want because we want to save lives. And that is the fundamental problem about this. But when you take that attitude, you're basically saying the regular folks out there will never understand. And I'm saying, like, listen, the regular folks out there, they've lost loved ones.
Sure.
They've been involved with addiction. They're recovering, persons as well. Many of them are well-read. Some of them are in the drug recovery, harm reduction. They're social workers. They're intelligent people. But this is all about what? This is about the community, and it is about not just a portion of the community. It is about the whole community.
Yes.
And what are you sacrificing? Because you're doing some good, are you doing a lot of harm? And that's where we get into some of the things that they're saying. For example, one of the things that they say, when we're dealing with the health commissioner, this saves lives and it doesn't cause harm. Well, actually, it does cause harm because we have the data.
Sure.
The data says it causes harm.
Heroin causes harm. Right?
Yeah, not just to the user who is in the place, injecting, but when they walk out the door, there is a 30% increase in overdoses, deaths. There are overdoses where people don't die, whether it's in or outside of a safe injection site. 40% of the profile of people who go to safe injection sites, 40% of them have already had overdose doses, and additional crimes increase. Those are all recorded. So how is it that when safe injection site folks, advocates come out, and our city government and our health department to communities, they say there's not been one death in the site and there's no increase in crime. Mm-hmm. So here's another thing. How are you counting deaths? Because the fact the person didn't die in the place. When someone overdoses, the first protocol, and see, I can't say this is how it will work with Safe House because they haven't opened one yet. But in Canada and in other locations, the first thing is when you appear to be overdosing, they bang the table. They don't want to touch you. They bang the table. Then they yell, they talk loudly. If you don't respond, then they'll put their hand on you, try to shake you, try to revive you. Primarily, they give people oxygen. They don't oftentimes use naloxone to revive them. When they do that, they call 911. They don't have an ambulance service. And here's another thing. Of the 5 locations in Alberta, the only one that had a doctor or nurse was in the hospital. They had a small safe injection site, kind of a opioid prevention site in a hospital. All the rest of them, no doctors, no nurses, no anything. Just people trained to go through this protocol, administer naloxone like you or I can. So they call basically for an ambulance, and when the person is revived, they have a choice of whether they want to go to a hospital or not. 90% don't. And the 10% that are put into an ambulance and taken to the hospital, there's no record of what happened to them.
They could have died in the hospital.
They could have died in the ambulance. And the other thing is the people who are dying right outside in Tent City or in the alleyway next door, that's not counted as a death inside. There are a huge number of used needles outside every one of these sites, in addition to the citizens that organize cleanups, that clean up the playgrounds and the parks and the streets, the volunteers. The government had to give $700 million to these sites for needle pickup. Why so many needles? Because people are shooting up when they're closed, before they open. Listen, when they get their heroin, it's not at a convenient time. You don't just get heroin. You have to go get your money, find your person, get your connection, get your dope, do whatever. And when they're reviving people or whatever, they're counting it as saving a life. But we don't know that they're saving a life. There's no standard to this. Sometimes they're just like, hey, are you okay? You're like, yeah, I'm fine. That's a saving a life.
Yeah, sure.
So when they are revived, some people have been revived with naloxone 4 times in one day. 4 times in one day. And then you close. You don't think they went for a 5th, 6th,
Sure.
or 7th attempt? And part of it is when people are awakening people out of their high with naloxone, they run out and get high again to chase that dragon, to get that high. And so one of the things that the Alberta study came up with, which was published, basically March 2020, so it's recent,
Yeah.
and it is a long expected and awaited, very high level, neutral study, and I have read it, cover to cover. So one of the things that they found is that it is only a kind of a limited group of people during the life of their career as, in addiction, that they actually will go to a safe injection site. And one of the issues is, are they being encouraged to shoot heroin because the safe injection site is there? And are they being encouraged to go for a higher dosage because for those who are concerned about their safety and their life, that this place will provide some level of reviving them, preventing death?
Sure, and it's interesting, and I do want to go into to the studies, because I've people ask me, like, have you ever read any study? They said, you've never read a study. I said, that's absolutely not correct. I have read the studies, and up until now, most of the studies that I have read were done by people who were in favor of safe injection sites.
A lot of self-reporting.
Exactly.
With
Self-reporting,
no
exactly.
data or follow-through. They're talking to people who are in front of them getting high about, I want to do detox. I want to go into rehab.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you recorded they said that. No record they actually
go
went.
in? Exactly.
Yeah. A lot of that type of thing.
All right, so we're going to take another break. You're listening to Ursula Radio and the Republican Zone.
I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. And even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. I have a mentor, Maria, and she convinced me to continue my education. Just never judges. She's a true role model.
From the depths of my heart, I thank you, Maria, for being a friend and a beautiful person. No one receives a diploma alone, and I'm honored to share this moment with you. Thank you.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Welcome back. You're listening to Ursula Radio and the Republican Zone. I am Drew Murray. I'm the host of the Republican Zone. I'm here with Councilman David O, and we're talking about safe injection sites and his bill. I'm going to say the number again, 200189. And right before the break, we were talking about studies. And, I was accused of not reading any studies and that I'm just opposed to safe injection sites. And I have not kept an open mind, which is absolutely not true, because I have read the studies. And the
But you are a heartless person
I am,
that
yes.
just hates people who,
Yes.
and you believe they should die. That kind of rhetoric is very unhelpful
Yes.
in this entire very serious discussion.
Sure. I mean, I've always said this is a disease. We have to treat it like a disease. We have to put money toward this disease on a federal, state, and municipal level. I just don't think safe injection sites are the right answer. And the one thing I've always asked, and I've asked for the data.
Right.
They say it's a harm reduction site. and that they do offer services beyond just reviving someone if they do overdose. So I said, I want to see the data then that says, okay, this person, January 1, 2019, was in the safe injection site. Where is the data that a year later, how many people, if 200 people were there that month, where is the data that shows if one person or 20 people or 200 people have gone into some sort of rehab?
So
there is no data.
There is no data other than self-reporting. You ask someone, "Hey, did you go to Oh, I did." You know, and the problem with that is they're telling people what they want to hear to use the place to get along with folks, but it is important for that. First of all, a safe injection site in Canada applied for an exemption. They're supposed to have a rigorous process of community engagement, which the criticism is that they didn't. They made a lot of promises about what they were going to do, and they haven't done it. And one of the things is that they do not keep any records of what happened to someone who was taken out in the ambulance, what happened to someone who said they wanted to detox or get into rehabilitation. There is no information on it. And so, you know, that has been the difficulty in really kind of saying, well, these are credible studies. And now that the Alberta report is out, we are looking at data that refutes what they're saying. One of the things that I was mentioning, and I'm looking at this graph right now, is between 2013 and 18, that basically cocaine declined continuously as fentanyl increased, and then heroin slightly increased during this time. And this is in a location where there is a safe injection site. But what this red line is skyrocketing, you know, beyond anything else, that's meth. And so what has happened is overall drug use has increased in these safe injection site areas. Heroin stays pretty much it's pretty much like steady, slowly increasing. Fentanyl growing rapidly, but meth skyrocketing. And so because of the number of people going to safe injection sites who do not do heroin, and the whole point was to save them from overdosing on heroin, they're coming in and doing meth, and so they have inhaler rooms now where people come in and do their meth. They're not going to die from that. And so now the exemption for the Controlled Substances Act, which was to prevent death, is now enabling drug use.
Yes. And they're probably not going to methadone clinics. And, you know, the whether or not methadone clinics are a good thing, there's debate even there. But if they're going to these sites that do enable them to do these drugs, they're not going to a methadone clinic that is supposed to help them.
Well, at this Calgary site, and they're measuring it by Center City versus the rest of the city, and then within Center City, there is a 250-meter buffer zone, which is where the safe injection site is. And between 2015 to 2018, the amount of drug-related service calls rose by 276%, whereas in Center City it rose by 21%, and the rest of the city it declined by 11%. And then when you look at violence, in that same period of time within the buffer zone, it increased by 47%. In Center City, it increased 35%, and the rest of the city 26%. One of the issues is why in this city in general, why in these areas is there not only an increase in the buffered area where the safe injection site is, but in the ring around it, and what else is happening? Do safe injection sites actually prolong and enhance drug use, increase drug use? Because one thing that it does do that the health people who are in favor of it do not address is you are prolonging the customer. Yes. The customer always got to get the heroin. There is always a criminal ready to sell and murder to sell that heroin and to force prostitution or take advantage. There is always someone to victimize, to give them the money. Does that actually create more addiction, more death, more overdoses, more murders. And so one of the critical things that we do as a city, we look at the total impact, not just the victim who is the person who overdosed, but the other victims who died while prostituting, who died from pneumonia, who died because they were murdered. There are many other people to look at. And, I just say, listen, I start in Mexico because that's where our heroin's coming from. The Mexican cartels went to the farms and went from marijuana to heroin. And in between 2006 and 2012, there's an estimated 120,000 drug-related murders. Drug-related murders. That's not even like aggravated assaults, injuries. There's 27,000 people missing, and last year that number is increasing. That's direct murders.
Sure.
Once you get into Philadelphia, you have people who are killing each other to sell heroin to people who want to purchase it, because the victims of addiction are the perpetrators of other crimes. This is not a victimless crime. There is crime all over the place. And so the issue of the total number of deaths, overdose, and other things, in addition to people losing their jobs, the indirect negative effects, the people moving out of their communities, children being harmed to and from school, all of that is something that we have to look at. And so when people say, well, I'm a health professional and this saves lives, I'm like, listen, you're kind of like looking at one part of the body, saying we're gonna address this issue no matter how much it harms the rest of the body.
Because if you increase the safe injection sites are going to increase demand, which means it's going to increase drug dealers, customers, and there is and what this report is saying is that crime has increased around the site, which is something the safe injection site people have always said doesn't happen.
Where they have been able to gain ground, Drew, is by saying the science and the data. You would think that happens, but it doesn't. We could prove it with the science and this data. And even though there is data that it actually does, that they ignored. They present, the things that are only favorable to them. They say the other stuff, even though they claim the police report will say this is a police services report. All of these things, this is a blue ribbon, top-notch panel that came in there, look at all these things, had a very thorough process, and so they say, oh, these are not credible. But their reports are credible, which are highly, in my opinion, highly questionable for the reasons we just said.
Sure. Well, I know when Councilman Scola said he went to, I think he said Vancouver. I'm not sure if you went on that trip.
No, I didn't.
But the reports there said, well, crime did not increase. Well, I think Councilman Scola went to some local businesses and said, did crime increase? And they said, absolutely it did.
So what you can see without, like anyone here, listen, we all have computers, we all have smartphones. You could go right now and take a look. What you will see is tent cities. You will see trash and debris. You can find in reports how much money they had to spend just on cleaning up feces, discarded needles, trash, all that, large expenses, additional police. But the other problem is this. When you talk about the businesses, look at their shelves because of shoplifting. Look at the bars on the door. Look at the businesses that are closed. Look at how many went bankrupt. Look at how many people don't even want to come out their house and shop in the area. And the reason I say that is because they will also say this. The police are there sitting in their cars watching all this happen.
Because they're told to not.
Because the city is behind this. And so we get into the tolerance of addiction and crime when a city backs something it should not be backing, illegal drug use, which has just tremendous adverse consequences to the people of that community. And so by pointing to these reports and not looking into it with a critical eye, credible organizations with the word medical association, society, have basically drank the Kool-Aid, very gullible, to say, oh, this is a cutting edge of healthcare when it is certainly in controversy. I will say this. I've openly said that I've looked at it. I believe they do more harm than any good that they do. However, it is not up to me to decide that. It is not up to an advocate it is up to the people. And what the discussion we're having right now is what would happen if it were up to the people.
Absolutely, and that goes to your bill. And I'm going to ask a quick question, then we're going to take a break because Maureen Frattantoni asked this question, and it is, how are you going to measure that 80% approval rating? Is it going to be through an RCO process? Is it which we do already have in place? We do already have processes that help us measure those things. Now, in that process, it's a recommendation from the RCO. So this is absolutely different. And we're going to take a quick break now, and then when you come back, you can answer the question: how are we going to gather that data to make sure that you are getting to that 80% approval rating? So you're listening to USALA Radio and the Republican Zone. We'll be back in a minute.
All right.
What do you think you're doing, Kevin?
Was just gonna drive home.
There are several warning signs present that you shouldn't be driving.
Like hearing voices?
Like your text-to-emoji ratio?
Oh man, the selfies. Selfie, nailed it.
We all have warning signs that let us know that we're probably not okay to drive. Mine is pretending to be your subconscious.
Craig, come on man, let's split a ride home.
They call me Maxie, but I prefer tripod. I was your above-average four-legged homie, and then wham, bam, minivan. Some people pity me. Now that's lame. I still run, fetch, and swim. And the ladies love me. I'm the ultimate wingman. Just don't ask me to high five.
Welcome back. I am Drew Murray. I am the host of the Republican Zone on USALA Radio. I'm here with Councilman David O. And right before we went to break, I asked Councilman O a question. How are we going to gather the data or collect the data? How are we going to figure out if there is an 80% approval rating within, and is it a half mile of the site?
Half-mile radius.
Okay, half-mile radius. So how's that data going to collect? Do you know yet?
No, I don't. And I would not know because of this. Separation of powers. We write a bill. If it passes, that's the law. Then it's enforced by the administration, which actually is in favor of safe injection sites. Probably the health commissioner is going to come up with a process, maybe L&I, maybe somebody else. They'll come up with a process. Now, I could suggest that we know who lives and who has a business and what institutions
And that's
are
a good
there.
question. Would businesses also get a vote? Okay.
Yeah, because they're interested as well.
Sure.
What happens in your community if all the businesses shut down? They made an investment in the community. They're part of the community. You go to a favorite restaurant, pizza shop. Your kids go to whatever place they enjoy. Okay, they're affected as well. And so are churches, mosques, synagogues, institutions, museums. All that makes up the fabric of a community.
Sure.
So
I
they
agree.
they all have a say. And listen, quite frankly, it's really the residents that care, especially people who have purchased property and live there. I could rent a place a little bit. I could maybe live in West Philly, and I could, Southwest Philly, and then get a little apartment cheap, and I have a say too. But the point is, everyone's got a say. So, what I would suggest is that you mail something to everyone with online whatever, and you reach out to them, and then you get some type of response, and then you measure like 80%. However,
80%. Do you think it would be 80% of the people who responded, or would they need to get to 80% of the people who sent out? In other words, if someone didn't respond, is that assumed a yes, or does it get counted as a yes? Basically?
So that will be up to
The mayor.
the courts,
Okay.
right? I mean, in other words, if it were up to me, you'd have to get 80% yes from everyone in the community because we don't know who did or didn't get one. We know they got one. We should know, but But however, you could look at it as 80% of those who actually voted. So, the thing you got to make sure is everyone is knowledgeable, and if they don't want to vote, they're not counted, like all things. That's fair, too. So you have to get 80% to approve it in order to do what? To then go to city council. Because that process will be developed by the administration, they're going to come up with the process. They're going to say, this is how you get to 80%. You have to now get to council where we can check that process. We want to make sure it's legitimate, that you really reached out, you notified people, you followed. In other words, one of the problems that we find is when people are surprised. Well, yeah, we're doing a community meeting, we're going to have a community vote, and you got like 2 days' notice. So no, 6 months in advance, people not only have received, they have a chance to go through it, to study it, to get a second opinion, do some research, and then you can have a meaningful public meeting. And when all that is done, you bring it in front of city council. We could make sure that these steps were followed. And listen, if 80% of the community wants it, okay, now city council's got to make a decision.
So city council would still get the final vote then?
Final say. But let me say this. The process, if it's gone through and you got 80% of, a half mile worth of people, businesses saying in favor, that's pretty, that's pretty important information.
Sure. And I guess to play the devil's advocate, someone would say, well, then how would councilmanic prerogative play into that? Could the district council person, you're an at-large, so it wouldn't be you, but could a council person just say yes or no based on what he or she wants to do to move forward?
Not really. And let me just say what councilmanic prerogative is in reality. It's not a rule. What happens if you are elected district councilman of the 1st district, and I was elected councilman at large of 10 districts, right? There's a lot of things I don't do that you do. You are covering 1/10 of the city in a very concentrated way, and I don't deal with zoning, for example. You do, and you bear the consequences of it. So the thing is, there is a deference to the fact that you are spending a lot of time with a lot of issues that I don't even get involved with, because I'm trying to do the whole city. And I travel a lot, but you are in every nook and cranny of that city. And so if you want to do something all for yourself against the will of the people, you will bear the consequences of. But many times what happens is you have a group of people who want something, a group of people who oppose it. And since you are basically the one who's been checking it out, they call you, not me. If you say, I'm for this, it carries a lot of weight with me. But when it comes to something that is citywide, like a prison, airport, international airport, okay, that is going to affect everybody. And so approving of a safe injection site, that concerns me as much as any district council person in that particular district. And I think everyone's going to vote how they feel about it.
Gotcha, because you're right. And we talk about it's not NIMBYism, because most of the people I've talked to don't want it anywhere in the city of Philadelphia because they think it's wrong on many levels.
They just disagree with it. And by the way, NIMBY is not a legit issue. In other words, it's your house. Your family's there. You have every right to say I want or don't want this for whatever reason you care to. And that is part of the process. So when I hear people say something, well, that's NIMBY, that's just a way of degrading and dismissing that people oppose something.
Sure. I mean, I have young children. You have young children. Yeah. I mean, I can say without a doubt I would not want this anywhere near my house, and it's not NIMBYism. It is I don't want it anywhere, and I also don't want it near my children, because it is not just a quality of life issue. I'm not losing my view. I'm not. There's not going to be loud music coming from a bar, for example, down the street that I'm opposing. This is life safety issues. It's not just a quality of life issue, and I find it ridiculous when I hear, well, it's just NIMBYism, and when people say, well, I would have it in my backyard. Number one, I don't believe them. So
well, they also say things like, I have the courage to care. Well, that's also dismissive. Like, people who are against this, they don't have concern or compassion like I do. No. There's a lot of people who have not only as much compassion and concern, they've actually put blood into this and sweat on both sides.
Sure.
So you can't simply say everyone who's for a safe injection site cares and everyone who's against it doesn't, because we have plenty of people who have lost loved ones, who are recovering from addiction themselves, and people who have devoted a lot of time in trying to help people with addictions who are completely against this because
Absolutely, yeah.
it actually is not the standard. It is cutting against the standard. The standard is to not enable, to not help someone. If I said to a doctor, I have this rat poison here, and I'm going to inject it into my veins with this old nasty needle, they would not say to me, hey, wait a minute, let me get you a clean, fresh needle because you might get some other type of thing when you shoot that rat poison in.
Sure.
That's because that's the ethos of the medical community. You cannot help someone do harm. Hey, I'm going to slit my wrist with a rusty knife. Oh, no, here's a clean, sharp razor. They don't do that. So they're actually swimming up Niagara Falls when they say, in the effort to save lives, we're going to help you shoot up this heroin, which in many cases actually does contain rat poison, fentanyl, perhaps car fentanyl. That'll be fatal.
Well, we are coming to an end. I feel I apologize. I didn't get to all the questions from Facebook because this is such a, such a huge issue that we're facing. But Councilman O, I want to thank you for coming on my show.
Yep.
You're listening to USA Radio and the Republican Zone. Thank you for listening.